We're all set to get our first speaker up here. And so our first speaker is the CEO of Hardening Technologies and Practical DevSecOps. He's got a diverse background in R&D and consulting. He's also the founder of Null Singapore, a massive security community in Singapore. And we are super fortunate to have him here with us today. So without further ado, I want to welcome Mohammed Imran. Take it away, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Alisa. Pretty excited to be here. Could you please confirm if you're able to see my screen?
Yep, we are all set. You are good to go.
Hold on. Okay, great then. I guess you're able to see my screen. Thanks a lot. Welcome, everyone. As Alisa just mentioned, I'm Imran. Today, we are going to talk about what is continuous auditing, or you can also call it as what is compliance as code. And I believe this is the final frontier in digital transformation of DevSecOps. Let's see how compliance as code can help you achieve a massive amount of automation, and doing so, reduce the risk of your organization very drastically. So today, we are going to talk about a bit of introduction of what is DevSecOps, then we'll go into what is compliance so that we all are on the same page. And finally, we'll see how we can achieve compliance using code. And don't let that word code scare you, even though you are from a compliance background, right? It's very easy. The current technology will allow you to automate with just simple two-liners. We'll look into that. And finally, we will end the session with a demo where I will show you how we can embed compliance and compliance tests as part of CI/CD pipeline. And it will not take like ages to finish, but rather it will just take a couple of minutes to achieve compliance as code. And we'll see that, and we'll end the presentation with what else we can do in an organization, probably right after this presentation, right? So Alisa have already introduced me, so I will just skip this part. And in order to be on the same page, let's talk a little bit about what is DevSecOps. And I realize that there is no agreed upon definition on what is DevSecOps. So this is just my attempt to bring all of us on the same page. So I believe history teaches a lot in terms of what's going to happen in the future as well, right? So it was very important to look back why we started off with DevOps or DevSecOps. So if you notice on the screen, you'll see that there was a huge disconnect between what a business wanted versus what developers used to provide to the business as a solution. And in order to solve this problem, business came up with novel ways of solving these problems. Among them, one such methodology, one such method is your agile, right? Instead of waiting for like 6 months or a year or 2 years to provide feedback to the customers, we will now, instead of waiting for a year, we will provide feedback to the customer on a regular basis, probably once a week, twice a week, or whatever, right? Now, they solve this disconnect between business and development teams using Agile. Now you see, when developers tried implementing Agile, they were able to push code to production on a very regular basis, probably every 9 seconds. There are some organizations which push code to production every 9 seconds, right? Now, since developer teams were able to push code to production on such a rapid phase, operations were the bottleneck for them, which means they were not able to cope up with the amount of code developers were creating. And in order to solve this, developers and operations teams tried to see what can we do to improve this bottleneck? What can we improve in the process? What can we do to improve the technology so that as soon as a developer pushes code to production, it can go to, as soon as they push code to version control system, it can go to production very seamlessly in a less amount of time. And they solved this disconnect, the problem or the silos, with the help of a methodology and a new way of doing software development called DevOps, right? And by definition, DevOps had security as part of the initiative. But then just like everything else, security was left behind. We'll explore why, what are some of the reasons why security was left behind. But then eventually, now people are talking about we need to talk about security as part of DevOps, right? And I consider that as a final frontier of the DevSecOps or DevOps transformation, right? And then security did, thanks to the awesome work of communities like My DevSecOps, conferences like DevSecOn, across the world, a lot of people are contributing this to this education effort, right? Thanks to that, a lot of people are now embedding security as part of CI/CD pipelines. However, I still see the compliance team still struggling to embed security as part of CI/CD pipeline or DevOps or DevSecOps, right? So this presentation, I'll show you how we can automate compliance with minimal amount of efforts, right? So let's move on and see what else we can do to improve this practice, the compliance as code, right? As I mentioned before, when I say DevSecOps, it's about application security in DevOps environment or security in DevOps environment. And as you can see on your screen as well, I started the slide with DevSecOps, but then the first sentence talks about only about DevOps. So I personally believe there is no such term called DevSecOps. But then we have to bring attention of developers or operations teams or DevOps or the whole organization that we do need to implement security as part of CI/CD pipelines or DevOps. The reason for that is we have been talking about security is everyone's responsibility. I know, and we can realize or know how well we have implemented this as a security team. And we still see there's a lot of disconnect or silos between various teams, organizations, various teams, and across the organization, there's a lot of silos. And we do regularly talk about we need to concentrate on people, processes, and technologies. And DevSecOps provides you the framework to implement these things in practice, right? And in order to implement DevSecOps, I believe you need to have 4 important principles, or you have to implement these 4 principles. One among them is culture, and probably the least appreciated or least understood aspect of DevSecOps is culture. Usually people are drawn towards automation because that's the shiniest or the most sexy aspect of DevSecOps. Whereas if you don't work on culture, right, what happens is that all of these other aspects of DevSecOps will suffer. If you don't have culture, then automation will suffer. And similarly, measurement and sharing. You can call, and as part of these people practices, you have culture and measurement and sharing, which boils down to you trying to continuously share the feedback to your end customers. For you, that is developers or DevOps teams, wherein you will provide, this is the state of security for your app or your organization. We want to make sure this does not happen next time. And we want to also ensure that we use the tools which are used by developers or operations teams. Instead of creating our own tooling, it would be much, much better to use the tooling of developers. And that will reduce your context switch between moving from a developer-friendly tool versus, and then moving on to a very security-focused tool. And when the developers do context switch, the mean time to remediate vulnerabilities will drastically increase. We have seen that if you provide information to developers at the right time, at the right place, and with right amount of context, then they will be able to fix the vulnerability pretty easily in a very short span of time. In one of the organizations, we have seen that the mean time to remediate has decreased from 2 months to just 15 minutes because they were able to see the issues early on and the place where they love to see that, which is most probably your CI/CD pipelines, right? And then if you move on from a process perspective, right, we have measurement and sharing. And it's very imperative that we provide the feedback and the information and the metrics to the developers where they need it, which is typically your CI/CD pipeline. I've seen a tremendous amount of improvement in terms of how organizations do security when they expose these metrics to your organization. Maybe you have a dashboard which lists down, okay, we have 10 different projects and each of them are either in the red, green, or orange based on their maturity of DevSecOps. And that drastically improves the feedback and the education and awareness in the company and will help you achieve massive gains in how we see security. Similarly, when it comes to technology, automation will help you achieve the speed. And if you do this, we will have a lot of benefits, specifically the speed, reliability, and flexibility. And one side effect of speed is uh, if if an organization is doing a waterfall model, and in order to fix a vulnerability, they might need probably an year to fix a vulnerability because the development or the deployment cadence is once a year. So you have to wait a complete year to fix a vulnerability in production. Whereas with the help of DevOps or DevSecOps, you will be able to fix that vulnerability very frequently. Maybe since developers are pushing code to production every 9 seconds, you have ability to fix a vulnerability also every 9 seconds. That provides massive gains to both security and DevSecOps. Now, if DevOps or DevSecOps provides so many benefits, why are we not doing it, right? What are the current problems which compliance teams are facing in order to implement these technologies, right? Let's talk about that. And we'll explore this with the help of a very simple case. We have this imaginary company called Teachera. They are an education platform, and they are doing pretty good for themselves. They just finished their Series C, and they are doing pretty good for themselves. And because of the exposure in the media, they got attention from hackers as well. And because of that, they just saw that they got breached twice, not just once, but twice. And in order to fix this, they hired Brad. And the first thing which Brad did, as soon as he came in, he did the gap analysis or threat modeling or risk assessment. And he realized that the organizations or his organization got compromised because they were not hardening the infrastructure. And then they are not also ensuring that we are continuously checking for compliance, right? And they also realized that there is a huge attack surface in terms of application itself, right? You have they were vulnerable to OWASP top 10. So that's one of the problems he had. And before he solved it, he also saw that security and compliance teams are outnumbered. So his ratio was for every 100 developers, he had one security engineer. So the organization had about 200 developers, and he only had 2 people who were dedicated to security, one for network side of security, more of a traditional InfoSec, and then another person, Lisa, who was responsible for application security. Right? That's one problem he faced. But as soon as they tried to implement security, brought in a lot of processes, best practices, compliance, and standards and rules, they realized that the DevOps teams, because Teachera is a very forward-looking company, and they are using DevOps practices to achieve faster feedback with their customers and provide good value or features to the customer on a regular basis. And they realized that the DevOps teams are reluctant to work with security. And then when they did a survey with the help of his CTO, CIO, they realized that they don't want to work with security because they don't know how the security works how the DevOps works, and their tools are pretty slow, and how the tools reduce the speed at which they go to production, right? So that's the one problem we face. The first problem we have, the security is outnumbered. Second problem is the security tooling, the culture or the automation or the processes are not yet ready for DevOps, right? And then you typically see, if you want to automate compliance or just doing traditional compliance, you'll be asked to fill a bunch of Excel sheets. And probably, most likely, that same information will be repeated again and again or in different Excel sheets. So that's another problem which DevOps teams have with compliance. And then there's another argument now that people say, okay, can you guarantee if we are compliant that we will not be getting hacked, right? So compliance doesn't mean that we are secure or vice versa, right? It's a side effect of security, but then when you are compliant, it doesn't mean the security is taken care of altogether, right? And we'll see typical scenarios like Equifax and Capital One and all of these are some of the companies which were compliant to different standards, but then they still got hacked because they missed it. Or there's so much of technology, there's so much of change going on a regular basis in DevOps environments that it's very difficult to keep up. And one such way of handling this chaos or handling this uncertainty is DevOps. Of course, no one is trying to say that you will be able to catch 100% of the issues, but probably we can gain 60 to 80% of the quick wins if we implement security and compliance as part of CI/CD pipelines, right? Now let's look at how organizations are doing security, right? So typically organizations fill up the forms, Excel sheets, and then they provide it to auditors. But with the advent of DevOps or the container technology, an average age of a container is just 12 hours. And it's very difficult in that 12 hours to harden the infrastructure and then to ensure that it's compliant according to your policies, unless we are continuously auditing it, continuously measuring it, and continuously making sure that it stays compliant, right? So if we do implement compliance as code, we will achieve all of these benefits. And just like security, compliance is in a similar boat as well, right? If 100:1 is the ratio between developers and security, security team versus the compliance team, or risk team, the GRC team, whatever you call them, is similar. Like for every 10 security engineers, probably you have one compliance person or one GRC person. So they are also outnumbered, right? And then with the container technology, you can scale the Docker containers from hundreds to thousands just in a matter of seconds. And keeping up with the volume is very, very difficult unless we automate the compliance aspect of DevSecOps. And apart from that, it helps you provide faster feedback so that you don't have to look for where did we store that Excel sheet, right? With just a click of a button, you will be able to bring in a list of compliance reports, which auditors can easily review. By click of a button, they will be able to generate reports from across the repositories, across the infrastructure. And that gives confidence even to the auditors that, yes, they are doing security even in DevOps environments. And one problem we also see is that sometimes you need to educate auditors themselves that, hey, this is how we do security in DevOps world, which is very drastic or very different if you look at your traditional compliance. We do provide separation of duties. We do provide trust but verify. Trust but verify as a phenomena. But then we do it in a very different way in DevOps, and it's drastically different from waterfall model. Right? And it also provides you repeatability. If you automate one system, you can very well automate it, scale it across the different systems. Right? And there are different ways of handling compliance. One way is you could just continue whatever you are doing, but this definitely doesn't work in DevOps environments. So you need to improve upon what we can do to achieve the speed which developers are looking, so that we won't be a bottleneck to them. Right? One such way, without costing you a huge amount of money, is use the existing configuration management system, be it Terraform, CloudFormation, or if you're using on-prem kind of system, maybe you have Ansible, Chef, Puppet. You can use those also to achieve compliance. Or you can use dedicated tooling like you have Open Policy Agent, Inspect, and whatnot. Right? So with that, what I will do is I'll show you a quick demo on how a traditional pipeline, a traditional compliance initiative can be moved to a CI/CD pipeline and still can provide you a lot of benefit. And you can automate about 60 to 80% of your compliance efforts, no matter if you're using an on-prem system or on cloud system. So let's look into a quick example here. So what you're seeing here is a GitLab CI implementation, a CI/CD pipeline implementation. And don't let this scare you. But what I want to show you is that we have automated here compliance with just 2 lines of code, which is this. As you can see here, we have we're installing a tool called Inspec. It's a free open source tool to do compliance as code. And you see we are hardening a Linux operating system, which is at the IP address 10.0.1.22, and then see how active or how compliant is this machine, right? As you can see, when we ran this pipeline, you will see that we ran a bunch of tests here, probably about 100 here, and then among this 100, we have about 21 success. We made sure that 21 of these controls were successful, meaning that we are still adhering to those compliance initiatives, compliance aspects of be it be PCI DSS or whatnot. And then among these, 30 controls failed, which means you still have work to do. But if you look at it, some of these are not uh, some of them are not so severe that you will fail your compliance objectives or you will fail your audits, right? Then your team can then put this into backlog and then continuously iterate on it, make sure that you don't have any reds here. So the green is good here and the red is bad. And you might be wondering, if we do compliance as code, maybe it takes a lot of time for you to do. And as you can see, this is a pipeline which I just ran. As you can see, the entire pipeline can be done in just 6 minutes and 43 seconds. As you can see, I'm running static analysis to ensure we are compliant to different audits or different standards that we have to have static analysis as part of CI/CD systems, as part of software development. We also are testing here for SCA, dependency scanning, right? We are also making sure our containers are secure from bugs and vulnerabilities with the help of artifact scanning. And we're also making sure that we run dynamic analysis scans on a regular basis before we deploy to staging our production environments. And if you notice in the production, we are making sure the environment is hardened on probably every deployment. And then we're also making sure this infrastructure stays compliant. And this can be configured on a per commit basis or on a per deployment basis on a regular interval. Maybe you want to make sure our system is still compliant every 12 hours. And if you click on this link on the compliance aspect of here, you see it just took me 1 minute and 21 seconds to achieve this. Right? I've automated this with just 2 lines of code. And then we were able to find out if the system is still compliant after we hardening it in just 1 minute. And you will also see that this is very easy to do as well. Okay, let's look at an example. When people say, compliance as code, we can automate compliance as code, and they usually say, okay, Imran, this is all good and fair, but I probably don't know how to code. But let's explore why that's not a big issue. As you can see, the syntax which you see on your screen, the code, though it looks scary, it's just a couple of lines of YAML. It's a file format, which is traditionally used by modern DevOps tooling, be it CI/CD pipelines, Kubernetes, and different other modern systems, even Open Policy Agent. And as you can see here, we are just running a tool using Ansible here. We are trying to harden infrastructure with the help of an open source hardening role called OS Hardening from dev-sec project. And in order to run this, all you have to do is just run that command, Ansible playbook, Ansible hardening. And eventually, you want to make sure once we harden it, it stays compliant to our standards, right? Whatever standards or policies we have to adhere to, right? And you can easily create a PCI DSS or SOX or a SOC 2 compliant with the help of Inspector. It's a free open source tool. We'll look into what that is in a minute. And in order to run this, all you have to do is just run one-liner. And as you can see here, we are running it on a Windows machine. The password of that is DevSecOps. There's a bunch of ways of running it on Linux machine, Docker containers, what have you, right? Now, as I mentioned, people are really, really scared about code. When we say compliance as code, infrastructure as code, security as code, they are very scared. But fact is, whatever you call it, security as code, compliance as code, infrastructure as code, it's just a bunch of text files or YAML files which help you achieve compliance or security in aspect of it. And people, you might be laughing at it, but that's the reality, right? It's very, very easy to do compliance. We now have all the technological pieces to implement compliance and automate compliance with ease, right? And Inspect is such a tool which helps you automate this. And it's very easy to understand. And then, and you can do automation. If you can understand English language, you can automate with the help of Inspect. And it supports a bunch of operating systems, and it has extensive language. If you want to improve it further, then you can definitely do that. And then a typical workflow of how this looks like would be, you will start off with hardening the infrastructure. And once you harden it, in order to ensure that this stays compliant, you regularly run your compliance checks on this one. And as soon as your compliance checks fail, you can automatically start the hardening aspect, or you can email your operations team or your security team or your SOC operations as well. And if the tests pass, then you don't have any action to do. You can very well be move on to the next stage and then do what you're good at, which is trying to make sure our organization reduces the risk, both from a business perspective and also from technology perspective. And then if we do all of this, we will achieve compliance objectives, compliance as code objectives. Right? And as you can see on your screen, it's very easy to write as well. As you can see, what we are saying here is, as part of PCI DSS, we have to run an antivirus software on each machine. As you can see, the second line there, which says describe service ClamAV, which is an operating system, and we are making sure it should be installed, it should be enabled, and it should be running. As simple as that. If you can understand English, you can write compliance as code scripts. You will also see that we want to also make sure there's a file called etc password, and then it should be a file. And you do have a lot of helpful guides like CSI benchmarks to help you learn what these are, and you can automate it. And if you say that, Imran, I'm still not comfortable doing it, you can hire a software developer, or you can hire, you can take help of your security team in order for you to do this. It's very easy to do. Again, as I mentioned, it runs on Windows, Linux, Mac, even on mainframes. And as I mentioned before, people have done a lot of work on this in order to automate compliance, some aspects of compliance. So 80% of your job is already done. You only have to figure out the rest of this 20%, which is usually involves tweaking these rule sets or profiles or controls according to your requirements. Let's say you only have to be compliant with PCI DSS, then you will remove the standards of other probably. Again, you can leave that be, but if you think it's overwhelming you, then probably you can say, okay, according to PCI DSS, we have to adhere to these best practices. We will enable that, run those things for project 1, project A. And then project B has to be compliant with SOC 2. Then probably you will improve these scripts or change these scripts to ensure we are running necessary automation. Then we are necessary scripts to make sure that happens there, right? And dev-sec hardening framework is one such project which will help you achieve this kind of automation with ease. And they have a lot of automation, be it for SSH servers, Linux servers, be it for CSI benchmarks and whatnot. So definitely you can do this. And then not only we have Inspec, you can also use Ansible, OpenSCAP, even Open Policy Agent to ensure you convert your policies as code. And one of the problem we usually see is that your policy documents are a liability to you. What do I mean by that? You put in policy that these are the policies we follow in the organization. When an auditor comes in, they look at this policy and then they see, oh, you're not probably adhering to all of these. And that usually involves convincing your auditor that yes, we are trying to do security. We have these different controls which mitigate this risk. But when you have compliance as code, you'll be able to just click a button and then create these nice dashboards, metrics, and even the reports, so that the auditors have assurance that we are following it. And then converting those policies into code allows you to enforce this on a regular basis, even while this is happening in your staging environment or development environment. So you don't have to wait till the end, right? We all hear about this concept called shift left, which ensures that we catch issues early on, so which also reduces your efforts when auditors are going to come into the organization to audit your organization against the compliance. And also make sure that your team knows and understand what we need to do to achieve those compliance objectives. Right. I think with that, I will end my presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Mohammed. Again, just a reminder for everybody, if you have questions for any of our speakers throughout the conference, you can add those just right to the chat window there in Umbrella. Imran, while we wait to see if anyone else has any questions, I have one for you.
Sure.
You know, as you look at organizations that do implement compliance as code, is there a particular type of organization that you see that gets better use out of this, or maybe is able to use it more effectively?
Yeah, so we do see a lot of organizations from healthcare, even unicorns, both in Asia and US and UK, and you don't have to be a unicorn to benefit out of compliance as code. So we do see even companies which are still in the process of doing their DevOps transformation, they still benefit if they can work on the culture, the measurement and sharing aspect of it, even without automation. Right. So the quick wins definitely are automation, could be achieved with the help of automation, but even without automation, you can see quick wins. For example, now as soon as you convert your policy into a document which can be stored as part of your source code, then they can be checked into part of the source code along with the project. And then they see, okay, if I have to go live, I have to achieve these compliance objectives. So you can use something like BDD security, and Gauntlet to make sure those things are being done while the developers are still coding it, right? So you don't even have to go to the end to achieve compliance objectives. And then I have seen, as I mentioned, you can be a waterfall organization, but by giving this information, ASVS is a very good example of that OAS project, ASVS, that helps you look in from a security requirements perspective, like if I have to achieve these compliance objectives, what do I have to implement in my code or in my infrastructure or in my processes? And then that will give you enough information from a project management perspective, and then also from a timeline perspective. So they don't have to wait till the end to come back to you and say, okay, we are ready to go live. Can you please make sure that we are still compliant, and then can we go live, right? Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that does. That's terrific. So I'm looking, I don't see any other questions from the audience at this point. So want to say thank you again. Really appreciate the time, and it was a really fascinating presentation. Definitely appreciate it. And
thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you, DevSecOps. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, we're going to take a short break here, and then we will move on to our next speaker.